Good morning, everyone, and thank you for attending the RTA's meeting of the Board of Directors. Want to review the guidelines for this morning's meeting for those members who are here in person. Thank you, as always, for your great attendance. Please turn on your microphone when you wish to speak, and remember to try to turn it off, and I will try to remember to do the same when we are finished speaking. So we only have one mic on at a time as this proceeding is recorded. I'll call on you with questions or comments for those who are attending in person. For those who are remotely, keep your audio on mute as much as possible to minimize background noise, which will impair the recording of the secretary of this meeting. And if you have a question or comment and you're online, you're all good at that by now, your virtual hand, and the board secretary will call on those who have raised their virtual hand. And again, like us here, as we remember to turn off our microphone, please remember, if you can, to put your virtual hand down. With that said, I will now officially call the meeting of the Board of Directors of the Regional Transportation Authority to order. And will everyone in person please rise for the Pledge of Allegiance?
Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Madam Secretary, will you please take the roll?
Sure. Good morning, everyone. Director Indulcio?
Here.
Director Carey?
Here.
Director Colson?
Here.
Director Fuentes?
Here.
Director Gathing?
Here.
Director Gorman?
Here.
Director Groven?
Here.
Director Holt?
Here.
Director Lewis?
Here.
Director Melvin?
Yes, here.
Director Pang?
Here.
Director Ross?
Here.
Director Sager? And Director Yonan?
Here.
And Chairman Dillard.
Present.
We have 12 in person and 2 remote and 1 absent.
Excellent. Great attendance as always. Now that we have established that we have a physical quorum, our board secretary has received completed notice from directors Gathing and Melvin that they cannot attend in person, and that's why they are remote. And pursuant to the Open Meetings Act, they are deemed admitted unless there's a motion against it. I see no objection, and they may participate. Jamie and Chris may participate remotely. Item 3 is the approval of the minutes from our Board of Directors meeting on March 21st, 2024. Can I have a motion and a second to approve those? Moved by Director Gorman, seconded by Dr. Sager, that we approve the minutes of our board meeting from March 21, 2024. Madam Secretary, please take the roll.
Director Indulcio?
Aye.
Director Carey?
Aye.
Director Colson?
Aye.
Director Fuentes?
Aye.
Director Gathing?
Aye.
Director Gorman? Aye. Director Groven?
Aye.
Director Holt?
Yes.
Director Lewis? Director
Yes.
Melvin?
Yes.
Director Pang? Yes. Director Ross? Director Sager?
Yes.
Director Yonan? And Chairman Dillard.
Present.
That is, sorry.
And the minutes from the last board meeting are approved. For those of you who are wondering who our new addition is at the table here, I am delighted, and we're waiting for the official paperwork to go through channels, but John will sit in today and kind of get our feel. He's no stranger to the RTA, but John Yonan, it is so wonderful to, I think, I'm looking forward with great anticipation to your official service as a member of the Board of Directors of the RTA. John was the Cook County Transportation Commissioner, and a great one. And I remember when he left that position, both Leanne and I and Jill, we all said, ooh, he is phenomenal. You were awesome. You put together, I think, Cook County's first real transportation plan, at least in my adult lifetime that I've ever seen. But John is a transportation expert, a great gentleman, and will add he's a suburban Cook County representative for those who keep track of where we all come from, our appointing authorities as they're officially called. But John, welcomes. It's great to have you. He won't vote today, because we have, we've got our quorum, without him. But John, just why don't you say hello, and I'll let you, when you're officially appointed, even say more.
Yeah, thank you, Chairman, and just an honor to be part of just a great, group of folks that over the years, 30 years in public service. As the chairman said, Cook County was the last place before I retired, but 19 years at the City of Chicago's Department of Transportation, engineer two to, the chief engineer, and then went over to become the superintendent there at Cook County for 11 years before I retired. And again, just looking around the room, the great, opportunity I've had to work with some real talent here. Very happy to be a part of this, and hopefully the things that I've been able to experience could just be of value to this great board. So thank you, Chairman.
Thank you. I remember Mike Ditka once had a comment about Walter Payton. If you were to go to Central Casting and chisel a halfback, Walter Payton would be that person. In, just in terms of your background, you are absolutely a tremendous addition to our board. And it's great to have your engineering background as well, aside from just your general expertise for years in transportation, especially in the metropolitan Chicago area. So welcome. Very, very great to have you here. Madam Secretary, we're going to go to item 4, which is the public comment segment of the meeting. Any comments now received from the public will be read into the record by Joey, and I believe there are 2, are they not?
That's correct. We have 2 written comments that were submitted to us. The first one is from, and I apologies for pronouncing this wrong, Kino Gottlicher from Commuters Take Action. Here's the letter. Ladies and gentlemen of the board, my name is Kino F. Gottlicher, and I'm an organizer with the Commuters Take Action, a group of Chicago transit advocates. I'm submitting a comment to the board in regards to the performance metrics reporting as required by Illinois State Law 103-0281. We're concerned about the data provided by the CTA in the reporting at transitchicago.com/performance, how they comply with the law, and how it paints an inaccurate picture about the state of the transit system. The state law stipulates that agencies should report scheduled and delivered service. The report provided by the CTA does not report on the amount of scheduled service. In our own analysis, we have found CTA scheduled rail service to be 22% less than in 2019, while scheduled bus service is 7% less than in 2019. More detailed statistics can be seen on our website at ctaaction.org/service-cuts. We have made comments to the CTA on several occasions asking for a statistic to be included. However, in our observations, the CTA is systematically adverse to publishing this data. The agency has not admitted that service has been cut or reduced, and instead carefully crafts this language to say that service is optimized or schedules are dynamic. We hope that the RTA will agree that statistics on the amount of scheduled service and how it's changed over time must be included in the CTA's report. The lack of reporting on scheduled service is also rendering other charts in the report to be misleading. Page 13 of the report shows statistics for percentage of scheduled service delivered on CTA rail. However, the report does not mention changes in the amount of baseline scheduled service that happen over time. Over the past year, the CTA has reduced the amount of scheduled rail service multiple times, moving the denominator in this calculation. A similar argument could be made about page 8 of the report, where any improvement to double, triple rail headways is predominantly a result of reduced schedules. Additionally, the state law stipulates that excess wait time should be reported. Page 9 of the report shows this information. However, it only tracks excess wait times during rush hour periods. The law says that this should be monitored by day. Therefore, we believe this should be tracked for all times of service. Since rush hour service tends to have smaller headways, it tends to have smaller excess wait time if a train is delayed or missed. On the other hand, during off-peak hours, a single missed train can result in a big rise in average excess wait time. We believe data points for off-peak riders should not be missed from the report. Lastly, the law asks that the transit agencies solicit input and ideas on data publishing from the public and local groups. We believe that Commuters Take Action fall under this definition. We've reached out to the CTA to inquire about providing ideas, but took several weeks and reminders before they provided us with a link to a form to submit our suggestions. After we submitted several suggestions in early February of 2024, none of them have been implemented, and we have not received any further communication from the CTA on this subject. We would be happy to provide a copy of these suggestions to the RTA board if requested. In our view, the CTA's approach does not embrace the spirit of the law. Thank you for your consideration on this topic, and we hope that the RTA board can help commuters take action in all of Chicagoans to get the data we deserve about our transit system. If you would like to discuss this matter further, please reach out to us at commuterstakeaction@gmail.com. Second letter. Good morning, board chair. This work. Sorry, my mic seems to be off. Good morning, board chair Kirk why is- Good morning, board chair Kirk Dillard. One more.
Madam Secretary, oh, mine's off too. Now it's on. Madam Secretary, before you begin on letter 2, let's get the suggestions from the first person, let them know that, it's been read into the record and
Yes.
ask them, tell them the chairman wants to see the suggestions. And then Leanne, will you make sure that the president of the CTA and other appropriate staff over there see that letter and know it's been presented to the full RTA board?
Yes.
Letter number 2.
Good morning, board
Not
chair
number 2.
Kirk Dillard and fellow members of the Regional Transportation Authority Board. Sustainable Inglewood Initiatives is a local advocacy group working on environmental justice, transportation planning, intermodal operations, community benefit strategies, educational facilities, workforce solutions, zoning, and climate resiliency. We are pleased to witness today's release of the ordinance approving the 2025 budget call for the annual operating budget, 2-year financial plan, and 5-year capital program. The release would afford the public an opportunity to measure alongside RTA board and staff on what is driving decision making among the 3 service boards. Thank you, RTA staff, for this very thoughtful approach to the budgetary process and your intentions to really assist the service board through program alignment with the RTA ordinance 2023-01 Transit is the Answer plan to guide the region's transit system over the next 5 years. Congratulations on a great start, the RTA Citizens Advisory Board. SCI appreciates the scheduled focus on ridership attraction and the interest to both consider fare reductions to veterans and to better assist service boards with the pending fiscal cliff in 2025 and 26. Thank you for this opportunity to speak in the beginning rather than the end of your board meeting. To this end, it's good seeing the RTA remains in good hands. Truly, John Paul Jones, President, Sustainable Inglewood Initiatives.
Great. Any comments or questions on either of those two? And Madam Secretary, again, he may be watching, but we deeply appreciate both who have taken time to submit their written comments. Is there anyone in the audience today that wishes to make public comments? Seeing none, we will move on to the Executive Director's Report, which is item 5. Leanne Redden. Good morning, Leanne.
Good morning. Good. Mics are still working. So it's been a busy few months, and I'm going to keep my report fairly brief because we do have a pretty substantial report under our sort of Transit is the Answer implementation summary this morning. But since we met last month, we've done a lot to really advance work on the strategic plan, and which is really at its heart, really an effort to improve access to transit for everyone across the region, and really prioritize multiple collaborative efforts to improve ridership and riding experience for all. I've attended several conferences over the past couple of months that have allowed me to really share not just our progress and ideas, but also learn from peers actually even across the globe. At the International Association for Public Transportation, or UITP, at their policy board meetings I attended in April, where we were, I am one of 2 US ambassadors to the international board and sit on the policy board as well. So the conversations of these leaders really has focused on continued ridership recovery post COVID and the looming fiscal challenges that we are all facing due to the ridership drops. And I think these are, very timely and very relevant topics. I think a lot of us in the US tend to think it's just us. It's maybe not encouraging, but it's comforting on some level to know that the Netherlands are experiencing very similar challenges and issues, for example, as we are here. The other conversations that we talked about during those meetings was also fair policy, the use of fair policy and technology to continue to support innovations around fair payment, fair access. Again, another popular topic, important for us here, so some great takeaways. This month, I was also able to attend the annual conference of the Women's Transportation Seminar, or WTS as it is called. I serve on their International Board of Directors, which is largely in the US and Canada. I am deeply committed to advancing women in the field of transportation. While that group is not just specifically transit focused, more broadly in the broader transportation realm, I think this year's conference was equally helpful and important and timely in the fact that several of the conversations were given by women who really provide unique insights about women in the field of transportation, and specifically from the lens of equity and inclusion as topics that we are also very much grappling with in our region. And finally, I and members of our government affairs staff, along with leaders of PACE, CTA, and METRA, all traveled to Washington to the APTA legislative meetings at the very beginning of April. We'll transition now to my legislative report, and I'll speak a little bit more about that trip. So if we can go to, sorry, excuse me, I forgot to take my allergy meds this morning. That next slide, thank you. For those of you who are anticipating a conversation about the recent bill in Springfield proposed by the General Assembly to consolidate all 4 transit agencies, don't worry, we will get to that in a couple of minutes and provide you some analysis and an opportunity for discussion later in the agenda under the Transit is the Answer implementation thing. But what I am going to focus my comments on is a little bit more around some of the DC work that we've been doing. So as I noted at the beginning of April, we sorry, I didn't note this already, but we led a submission of a grant application on behalf of CTA, METRA, and PACE for $375 million as part of the U.S. Environmental Protection Agency's Climate Pollution Reduction Grant Program. And I just want to underscore that that's pretty significant because we in the transit space don't usually go after EPA monies, but they've expanded some of their opportunities in their programs, and there's a lot of money there. So we're excited to go submit this grant on behalf of the 3 service boards. I mean, a really great effort in collaboration amongst all 4 of us pulling that together. And this grant is for a program we're calling Transforming Transit, Accelerating a Zero-Emission Fleet in the Chicago region. And it would allow all the operators to purchase and deploy state-of-the-art green technology benefiting riders and residents across all 4 counties with a focus on communities overburdened by poor air quality and related health effects. If we're awarded, the $375 million will be divided equally amongst all 3 agencies, with CTA looking to purchase 60-foot articulated electric buses, as well as additional charging equipment. PACE would be able to purchase 83 40-foot buses, electric buses, mind you. And METRA could purchase 32 battery-powered trailer cars and 8 docking stations as part of some of their plans. The APTA Legislative Conference was held around that same time, as I noted at the beginning of April. And so it was well timed for us to allow us to meet with our state's delegation across the region on both the House and Senate side in Washington. And what it resulted from those conversations is not just individual letters of support for this grant application, but a joint letter of support across our entire delegation. So that's kind of a big thing, and it was well timed that we were there, not just to talk about what we're all doing in transit right now, but specifically around this grant application. The EPA will announce the grant awardees later this year, and we'll be sure to keep you updated as that progresses. More locally, myself and the service boards also testified in Springfield on April 3 before the House Appropriations Public Safety Committee to present our respective budgets and obviously conversation around the impending fiscal cliff, etc. The General Assembly is scheduled to adjourn on May 24. So next slide, please. So registration is now open for our annual Transportation Tuesday webinar series. And what began really as a virtual alternative to in-person community planning conference during the COVID period, Transportation Tuesdays has really become an equally popular month-long series that draws a diverse group of audiences and panelists to discuss timely topics impacting transit policy and planning. The webinars will begin at the end of this month and will be held on Tuesdays through the end of June from noon to 1:30. And they are free, but we do require people register to have the link to join the session. As you can see on the slide, the topics this year range from discussion on how parking policy impacts transit-oriented development to a panel featuring staff from organizations across the US advocating for, and in many cases winning, sustainable funding for transit systems in their region. You'll see a link to register for these 4 separate webinars in the Regional Transit Update newsletter that goes out tomorrow, post our board meeting, and we hope that you can share it with any of your constituents and encourage them to attend and perhaps even attend a couple of them yourselves. They're all very timely topics for all the issues that we are facing. So next slide, please. Just briefly on today's agenda, you'll hear from the RTA Citizens Advisory Board person, Jackie Forbes, about the first 2 meetings of the newly expanded group. Then we'll have an update on several strategic plan implementation activities, as I noted, as well as a legislative affairs update that I mentioned as well. So stay tuned. We will then ask for your vote on several items, including the certification of financial results for the first quarter. This item will also include an update on the data reporting related to the 2023 Transit Omnibus package. And you actually just heard a letter comment from a public commenter this morning. Then there'll be an amendment to the 24-28 capital program for approval of the 2024 federal funding allocation agreements across our region. An ordinance approving the 2025 budget call. Yes, we are officially going to be in budget season from here on out. And then 4 contracts covering managed services, security services, purchase of excess liability insurance, commercial banking and bond trustee services, and the printing and mailing of transit maps for the system. There'll be an item on travel reimbursements as well. And then today we do conclude with an executive session. So with that, Mr. Chairman, happy to answer any questions and turn it back to you.
Thank you very much. Thanks for your hard work. Questions, comments for Leanne? If not, let's move on to item 6A, which is the update on the activities of the RTA's expanded Transit Access Citizens Advisory Board. And Jackie Forbes is making her way to the operating microphone. We
Hopefully
hope.
it's still
Thank
operating.
you.
Okay. Good morning, Chairman Dillard and members of the Board of Directors. Thank you for your time this morning. My name is Jackie Forbes, and I am the chairperson of the RTA CAB. I'm here to provide an update of the activities of the Citizens Advisory Board. The RTA CAB was reconstituted in early 2024, adding 10 new rider representatives. The first meeting of this newly expanded CAB was held on March 6, 2024. The second meeting took place on April 22nd, so this update will cover the activity of the first 2 meetings of 2024. Transit is the Answer calls for the RTA to expand the role of the RTA CAB to strengthen the rider voice in transit planning and decision-making and help track progress toward the goals of the strategic plan. As a result, the RTA CAB's membership is now comprised of 11 voting members and 10 transit riders for a total of 21 members. A list of the new members, the parts of the region they represent, and their biographies are available on the RTA website. Since most of the RTA CAB members are new to the board, the intent of the first 2 meetings was to facilitate members getting to know one another and provide education on the purpose and structure of the RTA. At the March 6th meeting, staff provided presentations on the history and purpose of the RTA, the regional budget process, the capital program, the funding structure for the region, and the programs and services provided by the Mobility Services Department. During the April 22nd meeting, staff provided an orientation to Transit is the Answer, the strategies used to engage the public and other stakeholders, programs and projects within the Capital Programming and Planning Department, and activities of the Communications and Government Affairs Departments, including the current legislative agenda. The RTA CAB members discussed their areas of interest for future presentations. They also asked how they can get more involved in promoting the RTA's agenda. There was great participation from all of the members, and some of the highlights for recommended topics for our upcoming meetings included a desire to learn more about transportation funding, including paratransit funding, how to improve transit for all, but more specifically for riders with disabilities, a discussion on how the RTA will address the post-pandemic ridership and the fiscal cliff, expanding services for people experiencing lower incomes, veterans, and youth, discussions on how to improve intermodal transportation, discussions on the transit's impact on public health equity, a recommendation that the RTA do more outreach at a grassroots level to get input on how to improve transit, especially targeting engagement with youth. The next meeting will be on Monday, July 22nd from 10 o'clock until noon. I'll be back in August for my next quarterly update. This concludes my report. I'm happy to answer any questions you may have.
Thank you very much, as always. Any questions? So is the expanded board working out well then?
Yes, thank you to your support for expanding that role. We had an amazing conversation in our second meeting, just really getting to hear from the riders and what they're thinking. It really was a different feel in the room from our previous meetings.
Good. Thank you. Thanks for taking on the chairmanship of this, very important advisory board to us. Thank you. Let's go on to 6B, which is an update on Transit is the Answer. Our strategic plan. Peter Kirsten will be speaking first, and then he'll introduce, in whatever order you want him, Peter, the appropriate staff for the appropriate part of the discussion.
Chairman, members of the board, good morning. Thanks for having us. My name is Peter Kirsten, Program Manager working on implementation of Transit is the Answer. Go ahead to the next slide. So today we'll cover two key projects, the Safety Summit report and follow-on activities, including the Station Activation Grant Program, as well as the Transit Friendly Communities Planning Study, before providing the board a quick update on the Transit is the Answer Coalition activities. And then lastly, Rob will cover the legislative update. So as usual, I have a couple people with me. We'll just have people introduce themselves as we go. Next slide. So in March, we reported on progress made in discussions about safety and security issues relative to the summit that we held in February. This week, we released a final report featuring priority recommendations from summit participants. These recommendations were shared with regional officials, including Mayor Johnson, county board chairs, and key state legislators. Agencies responsible for implementing these recommendations include the RTA, the service boards, and local and state departments of police, public health, and social services. So I'll quickly run through those recommendations, and then you'll see on screen that they're going to be listed under each goal from the initial summit. So in the area of enhancing personal safety, we're advancing an initiative in partnership with CTA, Metra, and PACE to more frequently track and report on crime that occurs on public transit, which you'll hear more about later today. The report also recommends increased outreach to support riders from non-police personnel who can assist with wayfinding, fare payment, codes of conduct, social services support, and other needs. In addition, participants pushed for a public awareness campaign to address the perception of crime on transit and further promote good rider behavior. On the social services side, the report recommends working with municipalities and health departments to pilot non-police responses to mental health related emergencies on the system. This is being explored in Chicago as part of Mayor Johnson's Treatment, Not Trauma initiative. The report also calls for increased availability of Narcan, the life-saving drug used to treat opioid overdose, from free vending machines at key stations across the system. In addition, participants are interested in expanding existing partnerships with social service agencies to support people experiencing homelessness, mental health crises, and other vulnerable transit riders. Next slide. And then finally, to improve on the safety and comfort of riders as they wait and board buses and trains, the report calls for continued capital improvements at stops and stations across the system. Popular improvements include accessibility upgrades, lighting, bus shelters and benches, wayfinding signage, digital signs and announcements, and more. In addition, riders and officials are enthusiastic about the launch of the new Station Activation Grant Program to help make stations and stops more fun and welcoming as public spaces. So I will now pass it off to my colleague Heather to talk about that.
Great, thank you. Good morning. I'm Heather Mullins. I'm with our local planning and program management group here. So the transit station activation category was added as a pilot to our 2024 community planning program call for projects, which wrapped up on March 22nd. So the community planning program provides funding and technical assistance to local governments for planning and implementation projects that support transit-friendly communities. The station activations were a recommendation from both Transit is the Answer and the Safety and Security Summit. And we were able to add this new category into the program as part of this year's call for projects. So these activations are different from projects we have previously supported through the community planning program. Notably, we opened the category to a broader group of applicants, such as chambers of commerce, community-based organizations, not-for-profits, downtown business associations, and things like that. These also aren't planning projects. These are meant to be small, short-term activities that engage riders and residents and bring more of a people presence to a station or a stop. This could be performers, vendors, artistic exhibitions, and things like that. We had a great response. We had 18 applications submitted from across the region. And after reviewing the applications with our service board partners, we are recommending 8 awards for a total of $123,000. Next slide. The location of the 8 activation awards are listed on the slide. These are all 1 day, in some cases, maybe 2, 3 day short-term activations. The first is at the CTA Cicero Green Line Station in the Garfield Park neighborhood. Second is the CTA 63rd and Cottage Grove Green Line Station in Woodlawn. The CTA Morse Red Line Station in the Rogers Park neighborhood. The CTA Loyola Red Line Station and CTA bus routes 147 and 151 on Sheridan Road in Edgewater. The CTA Broadway and Lawrence routes 36 and 81 in Uptown. The Maywood Metro Station, the Metra 79th Street Station in Chatham and 147th Street Station in South Suburban Harvey, and the Pace Joliet Transit Center. So our next steps, we'll be sending out official notifications to everyone and move forward with entering into contracts, and successful applicants can get started on planning these immediately. We'll also be promoting these activations over the summer and the fall to encourage participation, but these are going to be happening quickly. I'm happy to answer any questions on this.
Please.
Before we go to Rob, just to compliment staff, we heard from a lot of advocates, and it was a big topic of conversation at the Safety and Security Summit, and staff kind of really being nimble and pivoting and adding this program in very short turnaround, with a goal on showing how sometimes small investments in and around transit stations can actually do a lot to, make people feel safe and more welcomed and with an ultimate goal of hopefully improving ridership too. So I just wanted to compliment staff on that. And then the support from the service boards and the advocates kind of really coming together and partnering on trying to pull this together in fairly short turnaround. So.
Director Gorman.
Yeah, thank you. So with the 8 different selections, there's going to be 8 different projects for the different service boards. What do those projects consist of? Do you know yet?
Yeah, so it's a variety of things. So some of them they're actually bringing in musical performers. So it'd be sometimes in the evening, they might bring in a band. That's one of them. That'll be about 3 different nights. Other ones are, well, the one at 63rd and Cottage Grove is being put on by an organization called the Gardeneers, and they're do urban farming. So they're going to be doing kind of an exhibition on urban farming and plants, and that'll just be a 1-day activity that'll be right at the station there. So I think it runs the gamut. We've got kind of our urban farming. We have quite a few musical performances. There's some daily yoga that's happening, things like that. Just things that can bring out people from the community to the station, participate in something, and perhaps make them feel more comfortable using that station.
Thank you.
And we'll be putting out more details on what exactly is happening at all these stations as well. We've got all that information.
And Heather, Rob's sitting to your right, but make sure you involve the state legislators in these things as
Good idea.
well.
Yep, will do. All right.
All right, thank you.
That's it. All right, next slide. I'll be doing the next item as well. Okay, so now I'm going to provide an update on the transit-friendly communities guide. So we've been developing this guide is a direct outcome of the strategic plan process. Specifically, the transit-friendly communities guide is meant to set standards for communities throughout the region, city and suburban, to host transit services either currently or in the future to support and encourage land use decisions that improve access to transit to ensure that our riders can ride safely and efficiently. We created a similar guide in the past. About 12 years ago, we created the Setting the Stage for Transit Guide. This guide was primarily created during a time when a lot of communities didn't have transit service and were watching new service. So we created a guide for those communities to communicate the types of land use and access infrastructure that would be needed to support new transit service. So some of the elements of that guide are still relevant, but many of them are not. The world has changed a lot in the last 12 years. We have significantly different transportation trends. We're still building back ridership from pandemic loss, and we have new micromobility modes that we're using. We also have a housing availability and affordability crisis, and we are looking to push more equitable transit-oriented development, which means TOD for everyone and informed by everyone. We want this guide to be able to support, encourage, and educate land use decision makers on strategies and policies to make their communities more transit friendly. The RTA oversees a transit system, but we have no authority over land uses, and that lies in the hands of our municipal officials. So we want to identify any barriers or opportunities for transit-friendly development, and we will develop strategies and policies to help overcome those barriers and capitalize on the opportunities. Next slide. So this image lays out the timeline and major tasks of this process. To create this guide, we have organized a steering committee that's composed of representatives from our service boards, county DOTs, municipalities, advocacy organizations, and land use developers representing the entire region. We kicked off the process with our steering committee in April, and we are currently working on steps 2 through 4 of the timeline. We're wrapping up holding 5 different focus groups to gain feedback on the main content of the guide and completing data collection and identifying relevant case studies to include in the guide. We are going to reconvene the steering committee on June 4th to review the information we've developed to date. And we are on target to have a final guide complete by the end of this year, which we will present to this board. So happy to answer any questions on this as well.
Dr. Carey.
I'm wondering, this sounds like sort of work that CMAP might be involved in. Are you working with them at all or able to build on any work that they've done?
Yeah, absolutely. They're on our steering committee, so they've been providing some feedback on that. I think they're particularly helpful in helping with some of the housing issues that we're trying to tackle as part of this guide as well. They've got a lot of
Okay,
expertise
great.
in that area.
Thanks.
I saw the mayor appointed Roberto from the ETOD to the CTA's board, you know, great ally of ours, and we should pick his brain because he's an expert on a very important part of mass transportation that goes hand in glove with this. Dr. Sauger.
Yes, thank you, Chair. How many individuals are involved in this friendly communities planning process?
So the steering committee, I think we have about 20 different representatives on that group, but we're also holding 5 different focus groups that have had anywhere from 15 to 20 people on that. So we had focus groups with transportation officials, our staff. We just had one yesterday with municipal staff. We had another one with land use developers, and we'll also be holding one with not-for-profits and community organizations. Yeah.
Thank you. And I trust that there's a pretty healthy representation from collar counties. Is that
Correct.
the
Yeah,
case?
yeah. We have all of the county DOT staff are on the steering committee. We also have municipal staff from the collar counties. So the Village of Cary actually has a representative on our steering committee.
Thank you.
Mhm.
And who, can you tell me who McHenry County has? Is that Scott Hennings by chance or?
Yeah. Mhm.
Okay, perfect.
Scott.
Thank you so much.
Any other questions for that part of Heather's presentation? If not, we moving on to Rob.
One more quick thing, I think,
Yes,
before
yeah.
Rob, go ahead to the next slide. So just briefly, RTA staff continue to engage with partners and stakeholders on plan implementation. This will obviously continue over the summer. Go ahead to the next slide. April 10th, we held the most recent Transit is the Answer Coalition meeting of the year. Over 80 attendees, including riders, agency staff, and advocates, met virtually with RTA staff to hear about implementation updates and provide some input in specific areas. Attendees heard from staff on development of the new tool for evaluating equity within the transit network, the launch of the Access pilot program to make transit more affordable for low-income metro riders, new initiatives to improve rider and operator safety, and progress on RTA's 2024 state legislative agenda. The presentations largely mirrored what we shared with the RTA board at the March meeting. So presentations were followed by breakout groups for discussion of specific projects and a networking session. We continue to grow this group and find new ways to engage, building the coalition around kind of the value that transit brings to our region. So plans are being made for our next meeting. It's going to happen over the summer, and we're hoping to hold that one in person. As always, we will keep the board up to date with our progress. And happy to pause here if there's any questions. Otherwise, we can turn it over to Rob for the legislative update.
Any questions of Peter? Great job. Thank you. Rob.
If we can move to the next slide even. Good morning, I'm Rob Nash, Director of Government Affairs here at the RTA, and I'm sure, as you are all aware, the key legislative update is the introduction of a proposal, and I underscore the term proposal, on April 29th to reform the region's transit governance. The legislation is being supported by a coalition of transit and environmental advocates and civic groups. It's the first proposal to be introduced as legislation, but many other funding and reform ideas are likely to emerge in the coming months. The sponsors, Senator Ram Villalam and Representatives Delgado and Buckner, are calling the bill a, quote, conversation starter, and say they do not intend to advance it during the current legislative session, which is scheduled to adjourn May 24th. One side note, having just been there this week, that date might slip a little bit, but there is, I think, an expectation that they will be done by the end of the month. But discussions about this and other funding and reform ideas will continue into the summer and fall. Chairman Dillard released a statement responding to the introduction of the legislation. You have a copy of that in the legislative report, which hopefully all of you have seen, and was featured in much of the media coverage of the last several days. Today, I'll talk through a high-level summary of the bill and its proposed reforms. Then we're happy to take questions and welcome your feedback. I was in Springfield, as I mentioned, over the last several weeks. Then Chairman was with me in the days following the bill's introduction, and we recently met with some of the lead advocacy organizations supporting the legislation to get them essentially to walk us through their proposal and then provide a little feedback on what they've put together. First, I want to highlight that the legislation does not advance the critical transit funding conversation in the region, and that's important to remember. It's obviously a huge part of this conversation that we have not yet begun. A companion bill was introduced that would appropriate $1.5 billion from the General Revenue Fund to support transit operations, but there is no detail on how this revenue would be raised or delivered and distributed. Existing funding sources, including the regional sales tax and the state's public transportation fund, would remain as they exist today, but transition to the new authority. There continues to be a broad recognition of the need for new operating revenue among legislators and stakeholders ahead of the fiscal cliff, but difficult choices still need to be made about the sources of this revenue. The bill proposes full consolidation. The RTA, CTA, Metra, and PACE would be consolidated into a new entity, the Metropolitan Mobility Authority, or MMA for short, which elicits a lot of bad jokes. Each of the new agency boards would be eliminated and a new board would be formed comprised of 19 members. 3 of those would be chosen by the governor, 5 by the mayor of the city of Chicago, 5 by the Cook County Board President, 5 chosen by Collier County executives, and from that group, they would select a chair similar to how this board operates. This proposed structure would result in the city of Chicago losing majority control of the board that oversees urban bus and rail operations. Cook and the Collier counties would lose majority control of the board that oversees commuter rail and suburban bus and paratransit operations. Chicago, Cook County, and the Collier counties would have equal representation on the MMA board, and appointments could be made at large throughout the region, with no requirement that the board member live in the territory of the appointing authority. So, for example, if the mayor thought someone had value from DuPage County, he or she could appoint that person. And the governor could appoint members from anywhere in the state, including outside of the RTA region where the tax is assessed. The legislation proposes a majority vote of the MMA board is final for all matters. The existing supermajority requirement for key items, including the annual budget, 2-year financial plan, 5-year capital program, and the 5-year strategic plan would be eliminated. Historically, this supermajority requirement was implemented to help develop a consensus across the RTA's large and diverse region. And so it would mark a significant departure from how this board was envisioned both in 1974 and in 1983 and how it's operated since. Next slide. Actually, I'm sorry, can you hop back real quick? I have a little bit more. The legislation also proposes that consolidation would happen immediately upon the effective date, but a transition process of up to 4 years would be necessary before the MMA would assume all functions and responsibilities of the existing system. Major issues left to resolve include the transition of debt, physical assets, bonding authority, property, staff, contracts, and pension obligations, all of which were not addressed in the legislation and are left to the MMA board to resolve. The MMA would be immediately responsible for delivering regional transit service while managing the consolidation process. And no additional resources are allocated in the legislation to the transition beyond what is allocated to operating and maintaining transit service. This all would be occurring while the system is facing an operating funding crisis and is working to deliver more frequent, reliable service to riders. Even if new funding streams are created that help strengthen the system's long-term financial position, the question of how best to distribute and efficiently spend those new funds to improve service for residents would just be one of the many urgent and complex issues facing the MMA immediately. The legislation also includes a host of other proposed reforms and amendments to the RTA Act in areas including system accountability, service standards, transit-oriented development, transit priority streets, and more. As negotiations continue over the next year, RTA will continue to advocate for full funding of the region's transit system, highlight governance reforms that strengthen coordination, efficiency, and accountability across the system, and the need for new sources of sustainable revenue for the system as we head to the fiscal cliff. We're happy to share more detail on any aspect of the proposal and welcome your questions and feedback on it.
Questions, feedback? Dr. Sager.
Thank you, Rob. I appreciate your report today. And I also must say that I appreciate certainly the opportunity to visit with you over the past week or so. And I appreciate the fact that you're willing to calm me down just a bit. And so if there are fees owed for, counseling, I'm willing to pay those fees. McHenry County is pretty concerned about this. I'll use polite language as I go forward, but there's a lot of concern about the combination here, and everyone is taking a more immediate active approach with things. And so there has been efforts on behalf of our United Cog County Board and municipalities to really kind of jump into the fray, if you will, and to provide suggestions, starting initially with the question about board representation, and secondly, with regards to the simple majority vote, to be able to preserve some degree of equity and some degree of consensus and resolution collaboration. To the extent that we've provided language now that in conversations with our representatives would suggest amendments to HB 5823. Based upon your conversation with me, I've kind of asked the county board and asked the municipalities and the COG to kind of hold off for just a minute till at least after this meeting, and to forward then some recommendations on how you would like to proceed. There is a very suspicious attitude, to be frank about it, among McHenry County residents and leadership, in that there is a belief that things are happening in the dark, if you will, and kind of behind the scenes and more rapidly than you are indicating. And so I do appreciate your giving us a little bit of guidance here. But I think those are the types of things that this board as a whole would like to hear about. In other words, you don't think it's going to go fast, okay? You think it's going to go slow. The details on that, you shared them with me, but I think that the board needs to, and deserves the right to hear those. The second thing is, what is the sincere hope here? I trust that the sincere hope is to move beyond the legislation which has been proposed, but to start all over again, basically, and to bring people on board with that. How are we going to do that? And then finally, even if this were to move forward and the transition, according to our understanding of the bill, that's going to look to this board to provide that transition oversight anyway. So if you could get into some of those details, I would certainly appreciate it.
Sure.
Thank you.
First on details in terms of timing. So we have heard directly from the bill sponsors, and Chairman Dillard was in part of these conversations, but others from the service boards have heard very similar commentary that this bill was intended to sort of ground a conversation. So I will present what we've been told by the sponsors, and that in order to have a more meaningful conversation, there was a desire on the part of some to have a proposal to sort of bounce against. They have then also committed to not moving the legislation in the near term because they understand there's some conversations that need to occur on a host of issues. Yesterday, and at least on the Senate side, it is their intention, they have not reached a final conclusion, but there has been a proposal made to hold a series of upwards of 8 to 9 hearings on this proposal. And really, proposal, there are folks that have other thoughts, and I can get into that in a moment. But the hearings would occur across the RTA region and potentially downstate in Springfield on the funding question. So I do think there is an anticipation and at least a plan, as we sit here today, for the Senate to embark on a little bit more of a methodical discussion of the proposal. So I do want to underscore that I think we take everyone at their word, and given the timeline and what is left undone in Springfield that has sort of an immediate urgency, I do not believe that anything will be moving on the proposal in the near term. Having said that, mentioning folks' interest in engaging in the process, we have said, I think consistently as RTA staff, that the discussion on representation and appointment authorities for the governing board is really a question for the appointing authorities. That the Collier County executives, the president of the Cook County Board, and the mayor of the city of Chicago are best positioned to understand the value of the current structure or potential changes they would like to see, and should weigh in most directly on how those changes might occur. I have mentioned to, I think, several members of the board and others that if folks from your local communities are concerned or have suggestions or thoughts, that now is a great time to communicate those to lawmakers directly and with the urgency you see fit. I do not think, despite the length and breadth of the bill, that a lot of these issues are settled in the minds of state lawmakers. And so sort of setting the stage with early commentary, I think, is always a good idea for any stakeholder who has an interest in a proposal. And certainly, the sponsors, I think, are the place to start, but legislative leaders are also going to be intimately involved in the discussions of the bill or the issue. I mentioned next steps in terms of hearings, but essentially the anticipation is that this will be obviously a topic of discussion next session, and that action hopefully is taken as we approach the budget season next fall, because that's when we have to start making choices about service delivery and other cuts that we might have to implement in order to close the gap. So I think there is time, but there is a pace we need to move at.
May I continue?
Still yours, Doctor.
Thank you very much. So I heard you say that you think that it would be advisable for the entities with the authority for appointing to contact our legislators and decision makers with regards to the import of representation. Did I hear you correctly in that?
Yes.
Okay. So do you believe that we should be moving towards a unified resolution? Something that all members of the bodies can consider and consider adopting so that we're talking or speaking in one voice here? Or do you believe that it's best for us to do this independently?
You know, I don't know if I have a lot of opinion to offer on the tactics that might be used, but I do think whether jointly or separately, again, any stakeholder, particularly if they have a relationship with an individual lawmaker, communicating those concerns, I think would be a good thing to do. I will tell you that in our conversations in Springfield, people are showing me messages and conveying what they're hearing from their local officials. And I sincerely believe it's helped to inform their position and how they've made their voice known inside their individual caucuses. So while we have a long conversation that will unfold here, again, I think whether or not things need to be done in unison or concert, again, I'll defer to the folks that have similar perspectives. But any communication that a stakeholder has on this proposal is, it's timely to deliver that now.
Thank you. So my question, Chair, is if there are other directors who believe that we need to either take a more unified approach with this, perhaps starting first with the RTA board, or a strong collaborative effort to our members themselves through the county boards or the city. And then what would be our timing as you believe, based upon your vast experience, to affect a positive outcome here?
Clearly, and do what you've done, Doctor. You and I have spoken, all of you. I mean, if you have a relationship with any member of the General Assembly, you and your appointing authority, talk to them, let them know, I think, how you feel. And we'll know, I assume, by our June board meeting, sort of where things stand. There will be hearings, so, we can discuss in June. If we want to take a unified approach, I would look at my statement, which basically says, we will cooperate and listen to proposals. Organized labor, a large segment of it has come out in opposition to this. Mayor Johnson, I assume he's now getting more involved in mass transit. The gentleman, as I told the Sun-Times yesterday, the mayor, has lots of issues. And it's interesting how they will, in Springfield, they view this as an issue a year or two down the road in terms of the fiscal cliff. They've got lots of pressures now. So this one's sort of, oh, it's not this spring, it's not this session. It doesn't mean Rob and I have spent an inordinate amount of time, as Anthony and Kyle, working on this, and including Tina. So, I think we regroup as a board in June. We keep our communication lines open, but there's going to be a number of hearings this summer. We'll have to figure out at these hearings if we want any of you, you are certainly as a member of the citizenry of Illinois, to talk at any of these board meetings too. Depends geographically where they're at. If they were to have a meeting out in McHenry, clearly, Brian, you wanna I think probably say something at those hearings. I don't know where the mayor will eventually come down on all of this, but the mayor is now, I think, starting to focus, whether he wants to or not, on mass transit for, much more than he had, 5 months, 6 months ago. So the mayor's focused on this. The governor finally opened his, a couple times they asked him about mass transit. So it's now sort of on the governor's radar screen. I'm going to see the governor tomorrow afternoon on something else. And sometimes when I see him, he grabs me or says, what do I need to know? But I think we regroup in June. Keep our lines of communication open. Do talk to your appointing authority and say, hey, what do you think we need to know? We are a regional board. And while there's partisan politics involved, I just tell most in council, many of your appointing authorities, look, you gotta look out for your region. Well, we all have the Solomon approach of having one system and one, we are all one economic region. But you do all come from some place that deserves representation on this board, and you all have unique needs. When Rob and I are in Springfield, trying to explain to somebody from Danville that PACE is not the CTA and who they serve is quite different in many cases, our learning curve is great. With all due respect to legislators who deal with thousands of issues, Speaker Welsh told us when we went to see him, your job this session and this year is to educate my members. There are many members that don't know the difference between the RTA and the CTA. And then when you get outside the metropolitan Chicago area, and don't forget the fiscal cliff impacts Peoria, Champaign, the Quad Cities. So we have downstate allies on transit issues, but to educate somebody from Eastern Illinois on what's going on in Chicago is sometimes it takes Rob 15 minutes to explain, different issues that are there. But I think we regroup, Brian, in June. We continue. My phone is always open to all of you. So, call me or discuss things. Rob and I, we've had dinner more with a lot of legislators. Actually, dinners are sometimes the best place to informally talk with some folks, and it's an eclectic group that he and I and Anthony and Kyle see and Leanne sees. But it's a mightily complex topic. And then their eyes really glaze when you talk about debt, when you talk about, pension systems. The one thing I always tell them is that we have a AA+ credit rating. We generally over a 15-year period have essentially maybe close to the lowest operating cost per mile. We've never had strikes. We've never had shutdowns like other cities. So there's a lot of issues here to look at. And obviously safety is number one. Security is right there at the top. But the CTA, which is the one that gets most of the focus, is clearly in, just like any of our businesses, in a new world in terms of trying to find individuals who want to work for the CTA. The CTA and PACE constantly with Metra have job fairs. PACE has, get employed on the spot type job fairs. But, President Carter is not making it up when he says he's got a shortage of employees. And that adds, lots of dynamics to the system. So, we'll keep, you've been great. You've been one of the more aggressive members of our board, and you should keep that up, Dr. Sager. And, you have the tremendous respect too of everybody in your county, because I talk to them, both Democrat, Republican, and mayors. So keep it up, and same with all of you. Depends on what your approach is or your relationship is with your appointing authority, but talk to them and talk to their staff. If you're a county employee, talk to the transportation staff, talk to the Johns of your particular county, where you're at. We just need to remain vigilant. I can't tell you what a great job, Rob is doing with his team of Anthony and Kyle, Tina, Leanne, everybody here just doing a tremendous job. And it's like being on a treadmill. As Rob comes back from, on Thursday or whatever from Springfield, and the gentleman's exhausted, I will tell you. And it's nonstop meetings, including some formal and some just grab them in the hall or grab them in the rotunda type meetings. Rob, you have any other suggestions or?
No, I think that's good counsel we'll learn more in the near term, I think, about the pace and schedule in terms of hearings. And so we'll have a better handle on timing for the next board meeting.
And I don't know, there's just so many pressures. We'll see how the state's budget comes out. I'm watching that one very carefully. The Chicago teachers were there yesterday. But I want to see where the state is economically too. Obviously there's an election, which is paramount, and I mean, we're in Springfield. Everybody always mentions the election, after the election, the election. And I want to see financially how the state's doing, because it's clearly going to impact the revenue sources that legislators are going to have a menu. They're going to have to, it's going to have to come off of a menu of something. It's beyond my pay grade. I used to be a policymaker. I'm not anymore. But we do know sort of what the number is that we need, and we need to keep focus on it. There is one thing that bothers me a little bit, and that's there was a report that was mentioned in the Civic Federation where they think there's hundreds, $200 million of savings in the combining of the three service boards in the RTA. That is just absolutely not true. And then I just got to make sure that the legislature and other opinion writers who are out there know that it's not anywhere near that. It could be off by a factor of 99% of what savings there could be if you do it. And I just worry that that's out there as as a way. When we say we need 730 million, they're going to say, well, you only need 530 million because you could save 200. That's just not correct. So that one bothers me. And I never have quite seen, and I haven't talked to the Civic Committee, but I'll get to the bottom of it. Are they for the MMA, or are they for the service boards under some semblance of what the RTA looks like? So I don't know exactly where they are, in terms of consolidation, if there's going to be any kind of consolidation at all. But our staff is doing a great job. It's just an incredibly complex, both legal as well as political, but most importantly, regional issue that's out there. And legislators will put it off as long as they generally can. And to their credit, they really do have other issues that are, including the migrant crisis, that's at the top of their list. Yeah.
Right. Thank you. One final thing, and that is that our county board chairman, the COG, is very much pushing to put forward a resolution right now. So I'm going to try to pull the reins on that just a little bit until what I'm hearing is till after our discussion in June. Perhaps at that time, we might collectively decide that a resolution would be appropriate, but just to kind of put the brakes on right now. And when we do, or if we do get to that point, then Rob would be helping us with some bullet points or some things that we can include in resolutions to kind of perfect these for our local units.
Yeah. I think you wait and see what happens in the legislature in May, and we might have a better idea of what their hearing process is going to be.
Yeah, I agree on the timing. Yep.
Thank you very much.
Director Pang.
Thank you. Leanne and Rob, have you had time to work with the EDs and the CEOs, PACE,
Good question.
Metra, CTA? Because operations should probably be the first thing that comes up in a hearing. And because, this is going to be very, very hard and very complex, but operations is number one.
So I would say we've had a lot of conversations with EDs. I mean, I've had 2 actual scheduled meetings with the EDs since this has come out to actually specifically talk about this. And more importantly, what are the next steps in terms of what are we doing? How are we responding? How the ongoing conversations with legislators primarily. I know Rob and his team, and then on the planning side and the planning and policy side have had similar conversations with their sort of counterparts at the service board. So there's a lot of ongoing conversation and coordination across all facets. You're right. There's a host of complex issues. And I think where all of them have sort of where we initially are all at is, funding is the critical issue that we have to address in the more immediate term. And if there are, as pretty much our statement reflects, if there are we are certainly open to the conversation around reforms and improvements that, can deliver better outcomes for riders and the residents of the region. We are certainly open to that. And that's the conversation that we're having internally amongst ourselves as to how we can sort of formulate that for those Now we're hearing hearings, and just even more importantly, ongoing conversations with the legislature. So had many conversations and continue to have conversations and sharing information back and forth.
And on operations, I
Thank
know,
you.
Sarah, you probably saw there was an alderman and I think they have hearings coming up in the city. Just to add one more, Dr. Sager, thing to the fire, hearings on the DNC is coming here, and it's a great thing for our city to showcase our city. But this alderman wants to know, well, how many buses are you going to give to the Democratic National Committee if you don't have enough bus drivers now? How many buses are going to be working for the DNC and not be on the number 9 route up and down Ashland or Western Avenue? And what does it do to your overtime schedules? And if you're short 1,800 bus drivers, how many of these are working the DNC and not moving people to and from their places of employment? Or it's summertime, so the schools aren't as big of an issue, but very good operational questions, as Sarah pointed out.
One more thing.
Yes, please.
If you want people to lean in on you'd got to talk about operations, because that's what they care about. That's what we're here for.
Absolutely. Operations is what's driven some of the complaints that are out there, is mostly operations. Okay. Yes, Director Gorman.
No, I mean, yeah, thank you for that, for the operations point, but also too, Rob, if you can obviously keep us, in the loop, with the hearings and, whatnot. And earlier in the report, there was that safety and security summit, and I'm not sure who attended from the RTA, but, I was not sure that the board even was aware of that, and it would have been nice, to have, some board members attend. Thank you.
There were a couple of us, which is good. Just one other general point, and I kidded at the end of Heather's presentation. So to the staff, everything that we do on a positive nature ought to be publicized. Tina, is worked her fingers to the bone with our staff. But every good thing we're doing, we clearly want to, gen it up. One of the labor leaders told me last Friday, and I called Rob right away, just said, hey, you just got to constantly toot your own horn, because nobody will do it for you. And everything you're doing, in Maywood or any other place, you want to let that community know all of the good things that transit does. And, Metra, when we're talking about operations, Metra, the CTA, they're up to their, the operations eats up the lion's share of what they're doing, and that's what it should. But we need to crank up the service boards in-house PR staff to make sure legislators are invited, as well as the appointing authorities, and let us know what we're doing, publicly in every facet, just because I think a lot of people don't appreciate all of the good things that go out there. They accentuate the negative, but we need to remind them of the real positive things that are going on. And there's lots, probably more than I've ever seen, of positive things taking place out there, coming out of the pandemic.
Chairman, I see Director Melvin has his hand up.
Yes. Hi, Director Melvin.
Hello, Mr. Chairman. Thank you. Let me take my hand down. Okay, good. In general, I think this is a very interesting idea. I think it's an idea whose time has come. As Director Pang pointed out, the devil's in the details. One of the obvious concerns is the structure of representation. I think I'd like to see something that follows population, so that as the region morphs and changes, and if McHenry becomes the most populous area, they get more representation. But we all know the phrase taxation without representation, and that's a little of what it feels like if you just look at this from a political point of view and a political construct. The danger is that you put something like this together, and as the region morphs and changes, you're back into a structure that doesn't really serve you well. The other thing I would remind everybody of is that when we were in the pandemic, the CTA was able to keep running, and the most critical workers were able to get to the places they need to be. You could find yourself in a situation where that kind of flexibility doesn't exist unless you have some sort of board structure that speaks to where the population is and gives the population the votes they need. And that's my first sort of comment about that. And that's all I have to say about that. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
No, very well taken, Director Melvin, including where do the financial resources come from? One thing that I kind of smile about all the time or gnash my teeth at is people forget that during the pandemic, as Director Melvin pointed out, the CTA operated round the clock because we learned that our essential workers are taking the CTA, including people with certain economic means rely on it more. And as Chairwoman or President Preckwinkle reminds me every day, Black and brown people take the CTA bus more than other folks. But we were awarded or it was opined by the American Public Transportation Association that Chicago handled the pandemic better than any mass transit system in America. And yes, we obviously have issues coming out of it, but sometimes we do forget, because Americans have short-term memories, that we handled the pandemic better than any other city, and we ought to handle it the next phase better than anyone else. And clearly, we're probably going on to phase 3, so we need to be the best in phase 3 as well. But Director Melvin, your point's well taken. Director Ross.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
I think one of the things that bothers me most about the discussion that we're having is that it doesn't recognize the work of the staff when they talk about this kind of reorganization. You know, we have 7 or 8 action items on the agenda today. Not a single board member wrote any of those. That all came from staff. And so in any kind of reorganization, it's still going to be the staff that's driving the work that the board has done. I have a hard time understanding where we as a board are not getting that done already and why a major reorganization is essential. I'm just not following the logic on that at all.
It's funny, Director Ross, Rob's heard me say this 1,000 times, because every meeting we end in Springfield, I always tell either the staff of Springfield folks or the legislators themselves, if you need information, the RTA staff is where you get it. First of all, we're going to have the real numbers, and our staff is the best. You all are amazing, or we'd be really, really in trouble. But you're incredible. And I remind everybody I see, if you need information, don't pull it out of thin air. Don't pull it off the internet. Come to the RTA staff, because we have the real data. And your point's well taken. And I always laugh, when they want to morph us or whoever into somebody else. We have the best staff there is probably in the country, right here, who are mass transit experts. Because my wife read an editorial that said, the mayor needs to appoint experts in transportation. John just joined us. There's no better expert in transportation than a gentleman who's just going to join the RTA board. And I always sing everybody here's diverse praises from your professional and civic backgrounds. But our staff is there, and I don't know where they think they're going to get anybody better or more knowledgeable and experts. I mean, Leanne is on not only national boards with some of our staff, internationally. Leanne is knows about every transit system in the world, let alone in America. And we will take good ideas from anywhere, from any continent in this world. But we have tremendous staff. Yes, Director Andalcio.
I just have a comment. What's so puzzling, according to Director Melvin, taxation and dollars? This bill, how many pages? Submitted over 500. Over 500 pages in the time, and this was just done for a conversation. I mean, RTA staff is available. I just don't get it.
just to have a conversation. A bill was submitted to have a conversation. It's very confusing and perplexing to me. Because the RTA has always been receptive, including the staff, to have these conversations and really get the real numbers. I just want to make that comment.
And I respect all the advocacy groups that are out there. I speak with them, I respect them. But, you know, and for whatever media listens, you know, I would say, hey, use our resources. Call Tina Smith and she will put you in touch, whether it's here or at one of the service boards, with the person that's going to give you the correct knowledge. As Pat Piper, the old PA announcer for the Cubs, would say, the correct, you know, lineup for today's ball game. We're going to get you the right data. You know, we've got it. We can overwhelm you with data, but we'll get you in the right direction and give you honest answers. They can draw their own conclusions after that they have that data. All right. Rob, thank you.
Thank you.
See you in Springfield next week. Okay. Thank you on that one. 7A are the resolutions certifying financial results for the first quarter of 2024. Malik, it's great to see you. Like your nice purple shirt, because I came from a purple university, so I need that to go back to my alma mater. And Doug Anderson is there as well. It's all yours, gentlemen.
Thank you, Chairman. It's an excuse to not wear a tie, which I hate, but good morning, Chairman and members of the board. I'm Maulik Vaishnav. I'm the Senior Deputy Executive Director of Planning and Capital Programming. And I will be starting us off today and presenting first on the performance measures. So great conversation after following the operations comment. And this is just for your information. And then Doug Anderson will present on the quarterly results that you'll vote on. So next slide, please. And I'll remind our board members and anyone tuning in online that we maintain the State of Transit dashboard and the Finance dashboard online, both of which are updated monthly and available to the public at any time in terms of transparency. Next slide, please. Legislation enacted in 2023 requires our service boards to publish monthly operational data on their websites for the years 2024 and 25. While the service boards and RTA have published some of this data elements for years, compliance with this act has provided them with an opportunity to streamline their transparent data sharing in one place and solicit public input on their data. RTA must annually certify that the service boards are in compliance with this act starting this year in order for the state to release approximately $19 million of free and reduced fare funds. So we'll come back to you at the end of the year for the certification part of it, but we want to make sure we are providing you quarterly updates on what data is being put out by the agencies. Reporting categories and data elements are specified within the act and include staffing, budgeted positions, current positions filled, hired staff, attrition, staff in training, and absenteeism rates, everything that is leading to some of the operational challenges we have heard about for the last year or two. On service, scheduled service, delivered service, total revenue miles, and access wait times faced by riders. And on safety, crime incidents, code of conduct violations, and the impact of other investments in safety and security. Over the past several months, RTA has coordinated meetings with the service boards, and I've led these meetings to create a working group to discuss and share methodologies between the agencies on what they should be reporting and how to meet the Act's requirements. And I'm happy to share that the service boards are making a lot of progress in sharing the required data, and we'll continue to work on that for the next quarter as well. Next slide, please. Here's a look at the CTA's performance dashboard landing page. It includes 13 months of detailed operational data ranging from bus and rail service delivery to customer service complaints and commendations received from riders. In all, there are 18 dynamic pages of data going beyond the requirements of the Public Act in many cases. The information is available for bus and rail separately, and the data can be displayed by line or route, by month, or even by individual day. The dashboard page on CTA's website has been updated in recent months to further ensure the agency is providing as much data as possible in accordance with the Public Act. Next slide, please. So you'll just see a couple of slides with examples of the kind of data that's on there. And here you see the performance matrix for rail service on time. So by month, you are seeing color coding for reasons for delays. So the number of delays and why they're happening, ranging from disturbance to maintenance issues. The chart, it's a level of transparency that's allowing people to go and check what is going on with the system. Next slide, please. Similarly, here's a quick look at the amount of scheduled service delivered by bus route for the month and day, and each day of that month. We heard one public comment today regarding some of the specific items with CTA's data, and we have passed on that feedback already to CTA. And our goal for the next quarter is to work on tweaking some of these things and working with the service boards on where people believe there's transparency in data, but the way it's sort of described may, there are genuine questions and we should address them, especially from the Act's perspective that people should be able to provide feedback. So we'll continue to work on that. Next slide, please. This slide is showing a prototype of what Metra's performance page will look like once it goes live. So this has not gone live yet, but we wanted to give you a quick look at what Metra is looking at. They're in the final stages of creating a web page. And right now you're seeing early 2024 monthly data that is being populated, and we will review the web page and provide Metra with feedback as it goes live. The landing page is expected to include the number of scheduled trains for each line by type of day, the % of service delivered, and other safety and staffing matrix that the agency will be tracking each month. Next slide, please. PACE recently released their performance webpage with January 2024 data on staffing, service, and security. PACE's work is ongoing to streamline their processes to obtain, clean, and publish their data. Next slide, please. One interesting thing we wanted to show you about the PACE dashboard is that the viewers have the ability to download detailed service data in a spreadsheet format. So for those who are just interested in looking at overall statistics, you are good with the web page. But if you're, sort of our friends at Commuters Taking Action, getting deeper into the details, you can download a spreadsheet and look at the on-time performance at various intervals along the route. This spreadsheet here specifically shows daily access wait times in minutes for riders along the Pulse Milwaukee line at specific time points along the route. Next slide, please. And finally, here's a quick look at some of the safety and security data that PACE is providing. As I mentioned at the start, we are really pleased with the efforts taken by the service board so far, but there's work to be done. There are questions about especially the safety and security data. We just released the summit report. The top recommendation is to create more analysis of the safety and security data. One of the issues is that some of the public safety data is collected by police departments. So transit agencies have very limited direct ability to influence when the data may end up in the public realm. But we'll do everything we can, especially with the CPD open data portal. Even RTA, some of my team members can step in and do some analysis and provide the update that is part of the Act. So we'll continue to work on that and provide that feedback also to the service boards. So that was my quick presentation, and I will pass on to Doug Anderson in a minute to go over the part that you'll be voting on, but I'll stop here to see if you have any questions on this segment.
Questions, comments? Director Carey.
I think you said you were already going to do this, but based on the comments, the public comment, the author was asserting that in their opinion, what CTA is doing is not in line with what's required in the Public Act. So I guess I'd look forward to at the next quarter, staff's opinion. Is CTA in line with that? Or are you going to work with them to tweak it so they're in line? So we don't get to the end of the year and we say, oh, you guys haven't been doing it right. We're not going to certify it.
Absolutely. I mean, one of the things we are bringing this early in the year to you is because we don't want to come in December for a vote and have never talked to you about it. So I think there are a couple of points in the letter that I believe are relevant to CT to take a closer look at. For example, they pointed out that the wait times that CT is reporting in the dashboard are only for peak periods. So what about the off-peak where a lot of ridership happens? So that is something we'll work on with CT and find out what additional work they are doing. But there are some parts where there are questions about what the schedules are. Well, the agency has the ability to amend their schedules. So while there may be questions around what is going on with the actual service, and it may not have improved on the rail side in the last few months. But again, some of that is how you interpret the information in terms of meeting the act. They are putting the information out there, but we can definitely slice it in different ways to make sure we are providing riders with accurate information. Correct. Very good point.
Any other questions for Malik? Doug?
Hi, good morning, Mr. Chairman, members of the board. Doug Anderson, Manager of Budgets and Analysis. My brief presentation relates to the first action item on today's agenda, our first certification of the Service Board quarterly results for the 2024 budget year. Next slide, please. Today, I'll be asking the board to certify the Service Board's financial results through the first quarter of 2024 against the adopted operating budgets as represented by our primary metric for determining substantial accordance, operating deficit performance. Continuing the trend we saw last month and last year, the operating deficit results through March continue to be favorable to budget for each service board and the region as a whole. Notably, PACE's operating deficit finished nearly 24% favorable due to the combination of expenses coming in significantly under budget, while ridership and operating revenue also continue to outperform. PACE's March operating deficit variance was somewhat lower than January and February, with the favorability driven primarily by lower than budgeted labor headcount, as well as their other expense category, which includes consulting fees and other contractual services. The 7.7% favorable variance for the region equates to $56.5 million of variance from the adopted 2024 operating budget. With all operating deficit variances favorable to budget and the temporary waiver in place for recovery ratio requirements, staff recommends a finding of insubstantial accordance with budget for the first quarter CTA, Metra, PACE, ADA, and regional results. Next slide, please. Since our last update in March, CTA and Metra have requisitioned an additional $150 million in relief funding. And as a region, we have now drawn down almost $2.2 billion, or about 62% of the $3.5 billion total. As you'll recall, the current budget and two-year plan shows that a budget gap in excess of $730 million will materialize in 2026 as the relief funding exhausts, if service levels are to be maintained. We continue to monitor the major variables which will impact the timing and magnitude of that gap, namely ridership and fare revenue recovery, sales tax performance, and service board operating expense levels. As we will hear later in the budget call item, the proposed 2025 to 2027 service board budgets to be submitted in a few months will provide a natural update on the timing and magnitude of our future budget gap. That concludes our presentation with a reminder that the first quarter certifications require a vote. Back to you, Mr. Chairman, for any questions the board may have.
Any questions? So our relief funding draws, many of our peers are essentially almost out of their money, are they not?
I think that's correct, Mr. Chairman, and the sales tax performance has really sort of saved us on that front, especially the addition to more online transactions back in 2021. Our sales tax is $200 or $300 million above where it was pre-COVID, which is very helpful.
That, and we just constantly, you all, the staff, communicate so well with the three service boards to watch what they draw down. And Rob and I, when we're in Springfield, tell the legislature, we've tried to buy you as much time as possible to make we know we have this major decision that's going to come up next year. But, many of our peers are already forcing the issue with their particular states, and we've tried to leave as much time as we can for thoughtful resolution of whatever we're going to do. The other thing I want to point out, I mentioned a second ago that, generally we've had the lowest operating cost per mile. As Leanne, in my first month as the chairman of this body, reminded me, it's a very good measurement, but we're not always wanting to be the lowest operating cost per mile, because sometimes paying more to get better and more reliable service is the way to go. But my point is a big general one, is we are tremendous stewards, as all of the awards from the governmental finance authorities out in our hallway attest that when we're looking, as Dr. Ross pointed out earlier, when we're looking at who could operate this system better, I agree with JD. It'd be hard pressed to find a staff or an operation that's going to, in terms of stewardship of the monies, do a better job than this board has since its inception. How about a motion in a second to approve the first quarter financial reports for 2024? Dr. Groven, everybody's a doctor here. Director Groven moves that we adopt item 7A, seconded by Director Fuentes. And with that, Joey, how about a roll call?
Director Indalcio?
Aye.
Dr. Carey?
Aye.
Director Colson? Dr. Fuentes?
Aye.
Dr. Gathing?
Aye.
Director Gorman?
Aye.
Dr. Groven?
Aye.
Dr. Holt?
Aye.
Dr. Lewis? Dr. Melvin?
Yes.
Dr. Pang?
Yes.
Dr. Ross?
Yes.
Dr. Sager?
Yes.
Dr. Yonan? And Chairman Dillard.
Yes.
We have 13 ayes and 1 present.
Thank you. So 7A is adopted. Thank you, gentlemen. 7B is an ordinance amending the 2024 to 28 capital program and approval of the 2024 federal funding allocation agreements. And Brian Lohenberg, it's good to see you again, my friend.
Hi there. Good morning, Mr. Chairman and members of the board. I'm Brian Lohenberg, Manager Capital Programs, and I'm here to request your approval of 2 ordinances. First, to amend the 2024 to 2028 capital program, and second, to approve the 2024 federal funding allocation agreements. Next slide, please. Our first ordinance request is a request to amend the 2024 to 2028 capital program. The funding for the 2024 to 2028 capital program includes changes to approved funding and projects for CTA, Metra, and PACE. The overall program is increasing by $341 million. CTA's program is increasing by $334 million, which includes an additional $336 million in CTA bonds to support the Red Line Extension project, as well as a $1.5 million reduction in federal formula funds to match the actual allocation. Metra's program increases by $2.4 million, with the addition of $3.3 million in community project funds and a decrease in $0.9 million in federal formula funds. And finally, PACE's program is increasing by $4.1 million, with the addition of $4.3 million in community project funds and a decrease of $0.2 million in federal formula funds. Details of all revenue and project changes can be found in the memo and Schedules 2A and 2B attached in your board packet. Next slide, please. Let's take a look at a few of the major changes, and the first one is from CTA. CTA is programming an additional $336 million in bonds to the Red Line Extension, and the amount is needed to fulfill CTA's funding commitment as part of the federal full funding grant agreement. CTA will continue to examine alternatives to bonds where possible, including additional future PAYGO allocations. Next slide, please. Now let's take a look at the projects Metra is adding as a result of receiving federal community project funds. Metra has received funds for 4 projects: Gresham Area Bridges, $500,000, Woodstock Yard, $800,000, Edgebrook Station, $1.2 million, and the O'Hare Station Pedestrian Improvement Project, $800,000. Next slide, please. Now we can take a look at the projects PACE is adding as a result of the federal community project funds. And PACE has received 3 different projects: 800,000 for the purchase of electric buses, $1 million for the purchase of electric paratransit vehicles, and $2.5 million for transit signal priority, which is covering 3 corridors: Western Avenue in southwest Cook County, Harlem Avenue in western Cook County, and Western Street in Lake County. Next slide, please. Our second request is to approve the allocation of federal funds between RTA and the Northwest Indiana Regional Planning Commission, or NERPC, and between RTA and the Southeast Wisconsin Regional Planning Commission, SURPAC, for federal fiscal year 2024. The splits are based on the agreement reached in 2022 and follow the same formulas, but with updated census and national transportation database data. NERPC and SURPAC have reviewed and accepted the proposed splits for federal fiscal year 2024. You can see on the slide just under 96% of overall funds, or $794 million out of the $782 million allocation, comes to the RTA region. Note that the service boards are amending their programs in this amendment that we've just discussed to match these actual funding amounts. Next slide, please. So to conclude, staff is requesting adoption of the following ordinances: approval to the amendment of the 2024 to 2028 capital program, and the approval to execute the letters of understanding with Northwest Indiana and Southeast Wisconsin for the 2024 federal apportionments. I'm happy to answer any questions. Otherwise, we're seeking your approval of these 2 ordinances.
Any questions, comments? Director Groven.
Yeah, could you just give us a little more background on what changed to drive that big increase in the bond funding, the 336 million?
Yeah, so there's a couple of things leading to this. One of the major items is that the federal commitment is taking a bit longer to come to the region, so CTA will require a larger match. And I think that's the largest item at this time requiring that. CTA's goal obviously is to get this federal commitment, which kind of unlocks $3 billion between the city and federal sources for the project, so.
So that sounds largely like a timing issue. Is it a?
Some of it is coming from a timing issue, yeah.
Okay, all right, thank you.
Any other questions? Rob, one more for our list of issues with the legislature is the regional federal funding during COVID. Somebody once questioned, it was a legislator who said, you know, and they're giving money at the RTA to Indiana and to Wisconsin. So, you know, when we're sitting there thinking about issues, if they ever decide to do something and merge anything together, there's one more where we do have a responsibility with respect to funds for Wisconsin and Indiana as well. Just one more complex little issue that Allison Novak at some point in time her eyes will roll and we have to figure out what we can and cannot do and what it would entail. Brian, thank you. How about a motion and a second to approve item 7B? JD Ross moves that we approve, seconded by Director Sager. With that, Joey, how about a roll call?
Sure. Director Indalcio?
Aye.
Dr. Carey?
Aye.
Dr. Colson? Dr. Fuentes?
Aye.
Dr. Gathing?
Aye.
Dr. Groven? Or Gorman? Aye. Dr. Groven?
Aye.
Dr. Holt?
Aye.
Dr. Lewis? Dr. Melvin? No, he's there. I'll come back to him.
Yes,
Dr. Pang?
yes,
Oh,
yes. Sorry about
thank
that.
you.
I missed my button there. Thank you very much.
No problem.
Gotcha.
Dr. Pang?
Yes.
Dr. Ross?
Yes.
Dr. Sager?
Yes.
Dr. Yonan? And Chairman Dillard.
Yes.
We have 13 ayes.
Thank you. 7B is approved. Item 7C is an ordinance approving the 2025 budget call. Hard to believe that's around here already, but the 2025 budget call for the annual operating budget, 2-year financial plan and 5-year capital plan. And our treasurer, Bill Lackman's at the table, and Brian Lohenberg is up there as well. Gentlemen.
Good morning, Chairman Dillard and members of the board. As Chairman Dillard mentioned, I'm RTA Treasurer and also Budget Manager. Today, Brian and I will be asking you to adopt an ordinance releasing the 2025 budget call, kicking off this year's operating budget and capital program development process for our region's public transit system. Next slide, please. The annual budget process begins in May and culminates in December, when the board will consider the service board budgets and capital programs for adoption. The budget call lays out the budget submittal requirements. The RTA and the service boards will work through each step, leading to a comprehensive 2025 through 2027 regional budget and financial plan, and the 2025 through 2029 capital program. With the fiscal cliff looming in 2026, we will be looking for the proposed 2025 service board budgets and financial plans to demonstrate heightened accuracy supported by reasonable assumptions, including the judicious use of the remaining federal relief funds. We will also verify that the proposed budgets and programs align with the regional goals and priorities of the Transit is the Answer strategic plan. Next slide, please. The key components of the budget call are shown here. As the region's transit system continues to recover from the COVID-19 pandemic, the general steps of the 2025 budget development process will remain the same. The regional economic outlook is the basis for the sales tax forecast used to set funding levels for the service boards, as well as for the service board's ridership forecasts. Conditions have improved since this time last year, with ridership recently reaching 63% of pre-pandemic levels, and sales tax remaining strong. The budget call delineates the information and statistics to be included in the service board operating budgets, including projected drawdowns of federal relief funding. For the capital program, the service boards will be required to provide descriptions of all planned projects and to evaluate the projects based on the 12 themes identified in the strategic plan. Next slide, please. As is the case every year, this budget cycle has some unique considerations. First, in response to a board request, we have included a new requirement for the service boards to list the initiatives in their proposed budgets and programs that support the 7 components of the Transit is the Answer strategic plan. This formalizes one of the criteria for budget adoption. Second, we will need to secure recovery ratio relief beyond 2025. To provide context for this, we will again include in the budget materials the recovery ratio without including federal relief funding. Next, the 2-year financial planning horizon now includes 2026 and 2027, years in which federal relief funding is expected to be nearly or fully exhausted. Accordingly, the service boards will need to quantify the dollar amounts of budget balancing actions needed to balance their proposed operating plans. The main variables impacting the anticipated $730+ million fiscal cliff continue to be ridership recovery, sales tax performance, and operating expense levels. The service board budget submittals in the fall will reflect the latest trends in each of these variables and will provide a natural update for the timing and magnitude of the expected budget gap. And that update will in turn help guide the discussions with Springfield during the spring 2025 legislative session so that new funding is included in the governor's state fiscal year 2026 budget. It can take many months from when legislation is adopted before new funding is available to support transit operations before federal relief funding exhausts. ICE funding resumes after a 2-year hiatus. As a reminder, ICE, or Innovation, Coordination, and Enhancement funding, was established in 2008 as a special use of Sales Tax 2 and PTF 2 for projects that support the integration, coordination, and enhancement of public transportation and improve its quality and delivery. Reflecting sales tax growth since 2008, ICE funding amounts to about $17 million annually, split 48%, 39%, and 13% among a CTA, Metra, and PACE suburban service. ICE funding will continue to be subject to RTA board approval for proposed operating or capital projects. The service boards will be required to respond in writing to RTA staff questions about their proposed budgets and capital programs, including any missing items prior to the November RTA board meeting. Finally, it is important for the service board capital teams to note that the budget call includes 2 earlier deadlines for submission of the capital evaluations and proposed capital programs. And with that segue, my colleague Brian Lowenberg will now address aspects of the capital program portion of the budget call. Next slide, please.
Thanks, Bill. Let's take a look at some of the highlights of the 2025 to 2029 capital program call. The capital program will continue to use the service board's 10-year priority projects to reflect the agency's top capital funding priorities and to organize those projects within the program. Each project in the capital program will be assigned to one of the service board priorities. All state PAYGO and federal formula funds will be allocated based on the performance-based capital allocation process that the board established in 2021. The performance-based process requires that 20% of projects be focused on one of 2 key evaluation themes, accessibility or equity. In addition, projects will continue to be evaluated based on the 15 metrics that were included in Transit is the Answer. These evaluations are designed to show how the program and its projects are meeting the 12 themes that the capital program is focused on. We've worked with the service boards to create a guidance document on how to evaluate projects consistently throughout the region. The guidance is included as an attachment in the budget call exhibits and details each metric and the possible responses. The guidance has been updated based on what we learned last year during project evaluations, with the goal of continuing to fine-tune the evaluations and provide consistent information across the region. The capital exhibits that are part of the budget call have been updated. Project evaluations will be due to the RTA September 27th. Capital project information for the 5-year budget and 10-year priority projects will be due October 4th. Other elements of the capital budget call process remain the same, including the opportunity for public input as noted in the calendar. Let me turn it back to Bill to cover the 2025 budget timeline. Next slide, please.
Thank you, Brian. Now I'll close with a summary of the 2025 budget calendar. Relevant board meeting dates are highlighted here in brown. In July, the RTA plans to provide the service boards with preliminary estimates of the 2025 through 2027 RTA funding levels for the upcoming year as a basis for discussions with the service board finance teams. Preliminary 2025 through 2029 capital program funding amounts will also be included. The operating and capital funding levels will be refined over the summer and are planned to be presented to the RTA board at the August meeting. The statutorily required date for the adoption of the funding amounts and recovery ratios is September 15th. The service board's capital evaluations are due on September 27th, while the capital budget and 10-year priority projects are due on October 4th. These dates strike a balance between giving the service boards as much time as possible to develop their budgets, while still allowing sufficient time for the RTA staff to analyze and consolidate the submissions into a proposed regional budget and capital program. The service boards are expected to conduct their budget and capital program public hearings in October and November before formally submitting their board-adopted budgets to the RTA. On Friday, November 22nd, the service board leadership teams will present their proposed budgets and capital programs to the RTA board and field your questions. RTA staff will again conduct our budget and capital program public hearing and county board presentations in November and early December. Finally, On December 19th, we will ask the RTA Board to consider the 2025 regional budget, 2-year financial plan, and 5-year capital program for adoption. That concludes our presentation, seeking your approval to release the 2025 budget and capital program call. Brian and I will be happy to answer any questions you may have. Back to you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you. Bill, any questions? Director Colson.
2 quick points. It looks like this year you're requiring a much more rigorous disclosure from the service boards in a lot of areas. And for that, I commend you. I think it's long overdue. Secondly, am I reading this correctly? Are we finally going to get a look from the service boards about what the world of transit might look like after we drive over the fiscal cliff in the absence of new revenues? And if so, I hope those submissions will be realistic and credible, because the legislators are going to want to look at what the world might be like without any more money. Am I reading that right?
So we are asking the service boards to include budget balancing actions in their budget. So we are in some sense assuming that there will be funding to get us beyond the cliff.
Okay, but there may not be funding, in which case they're going to have to outline the cuts, if there are any, right? Is that what the purpose of this is?
That will likely be in the questions that we will want to ask them in November.
Okay.
Yeah, I agree with Director Colson. We need, we need to show the public and our writers and legislators what a worst case bloody scenario would look like if there wasn't that funding. I mean, it will be ugly, you know, and have massive ramifications for employers in our region, parents of students who attend the CTA. I mean, we need to really show them a worst case, a realistic scenario of what happens if there isn't additional funding. And it won't be pretty, let's put it that way. Okay, I do want to point out the November 22nd meeting, that's a Friday. It's not our normal Thursday, the 22nd. If you put it in your calendars, yeah, it's not a mistake. It's a Friday. And 22nd is, for those of us of my generation, the day that President Kennedy was assassinated. That one never leaves my head, like 9/11. Okay. Anyway, let's have how about a motion to approve 7C. Director Andalcio, seconded by Director Carey, moves and seconds that we adopt the ordinance approving the 2025 budget call. And with that, Madam Secretary, please take the roll.
Director Andalcio?
Aye.
Director Carey?
Aye.
Director Colson?
Aye.
Director Fuentes?
Aye.
Director Gathing?
Aye.
Director Gorman?
Aye.
Director Groven?
Aye.
Director Holt?
Yes.
Director Melvin?
Yes.
Director Peng?
Yes.
Director Ross?
Yes.
Director Sager?
Yes.
Director Yonan? And Chairman Dillard.
Yes.
13 ayes and 1.
Thank you, Bill and Brian. That is adopted. Items 7D through 7G are the approval of contract and expenditure items as they appear on the board agenda and in your packet. Those items for consideration include 7D, an ordinance authorizing a contract for managed security services, for a managed security services provider. And Jerry Tombali is here if you have questions on that. 7E is an ordinance authorizing the purchase of excess liability insurance policies by the RTA loss financing plan and our joint self-insurance fund. And Allison is here if there's questions on 7E. 7F, our ordinance is approving contracts for commercial banking services and bond trustee services. Bill is here if there's questions on that. 7G is an ordinance authorizing a contract for printing and mailing of maps, and Malik is here, questions on that. And 7H is the approval of travel reimbursement expenses. Any questions or comments on these? And we can take them, I guess, we can take these, Allison, can we not, just on one roll call? If there's no objection, there's no objection. So how about a motion on items 7D through 7G to approve? Dr. Sagar moves, seconded by Director Pang, that we approve 7D through 7G. And with that, Joey, please take the roll call.
Director Adolcio?
Aye.
Director Carey?
Aye.
Director Colson? Director Fuentes?
Aye.
Director Gathing?
Aye.
Director Gorman? Aye. Director Groven?
Aye.
Director Holt?
Yes.
Director Melvin?
Yes.
Director Pang?
Yes.
Director Ross?
Yes.
Director Sagar?
Yes.
Director Yonan? And Chairman Dillard.
Yes.
13 ayes and one.
Thank you. And those items are approved. Thank you very much. Item 8A is new business. Any new business we need to bring up today? Yes. I'm sorry.
7H, you
Oh,
didn't
and
include
7A.
that. Yeah, you
Yep.
didn't include that in the.
Thank you, thank you, thank you. And 7H, you are right. So, the next item is item 8, new business. Any new business to come before us today? Oh, we didn't approve 7H. I'm sorry. So I just did, so how about a motion and a second on 7H? Director Andalcio, same pair, and Director Carey on 7H. And with that, Joey, how about a roll call on 7H? Thank you. Thanks for catching that.
Director Adolcio?
Aye.
Director Carey?
Aye.
Director Colson? Director Fuentes?
Aye.
Director Gathing?
Aye.
Director Gorman?
Aye.
Director Groven?
Aye.
Director Holt?
Yes.
Director Melvin?
Yes.
Director Pang?
Yes.
Director Ross?
Yes.
Director Sagar?
Yes.
Director Yonan? And Chairman Dillard.
Yes,
13 ayes.
that's my message to myself, JD, not to take up a bunch of them at once, especially if I have to have a page turn on my agenda. Item 8 is new business. Any new business to come before us? All right, with that, just a reminder, our next meeting will be June 20th of 2024 at 9 a.m. Here. And I see our legal counsel is at the table. So we will, Allison, if you will tell us our exceptions, why we're going to go into executive session following our regular meeting here.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Chairman. Pursuant to subsection 2C8 and 2C11 of the Open Meetings Act, the board may now vote to move into and adjourn from executive session at this time for discussion on matters related to security procedures and potential litigation.
Thank you. And we, excuse me, do not need to return. Is that correct? So how about a motion that we resolve ourselves into executive session? Dr. Sagar moves, seconded by Director Groven. Joey, take a roll call on that.
Sure. Director Adolcio?
Aye.
Director Carey?
Aye.
Director Colson? Director Fuentes?
Aye.
Director Gathing?
Aye.
Director Gorman?
Aye.
Director Groven?
Aye.
Director Holt?
Yes.
Director Melvin?
Yes.
Director Pang?
Yes.
Director Ross?
Yes.
Director Sagar?
Yes.
Director Yonan? And Chairman Dillard.
Yes, so that is adopted and we'll go into executive session. Now a real adjournment motion for our regular meeting. Director Pang moves, we adjourn, seconded by Director Carey. And with that, all those in favor say aye. Aye. Opposed, nay. The ayes have it, and we are adjourned.